can,
Right.
you know, and, but that's another story.
Yeah.
Continuing.
Yeah. Ongoing.
Just get the respect.
How you doing? Good to see you back. You know anything about that soundboard?
I had to spend one night in Beijing.
The you know, the battery goes push for it. It's like even if you turn it on, you know, it usually has that loud pop. Very cool.
Hard as that floor.
Let's see. Oh, I think I forgot to snag the Wednesday clipboard. Oh. I didn't say that for you to go get it. Did I say go get it? I was saying, because I was looking, I was trying to think of where it was, and sometimes I speak out loud and then I catch it. So she's gonna come back and say, where is it? And you get real emotional when you do that. Sometimes. I haven't been noticed. Nope, there it is in her hand. It's giving me the slant eye though.
Which is like a stoplight.
Thank you. Whoa!
I really do that.
No, I was telling you, I sometimes speak out loud and if it's not
It's no big
here.
deal.
Yeah.
I was just thinking when I left, an hour ago. They would just brought it up to you, so.
Almost forgot to get you, Richard.
What?
Jeff, is this the mic you're looking at?
I think so, yes. Okay, there's study sheets in the back, and this week there's actually two of them. So they're right next to each other, separate stacks. So. And, you know, I actually went back and redid this on my computer. Sometimes I even impressed myself, but y'all got like the original, and that chicken scratch on the side is actually my handwriting. That's why you should feel sorry for every secretary that we've had when it comes to those prayer requests and whatnot. They have to decipher my writing. So God bless them. But yeah, but we'll go over that when the time comes. I've got to get my shirt. Okay, we're having some mic issues tonight, so I'm just going to talk about it. Cosme! Hey. There he is. Cosme Tiarina is walking down the aisle wearing his winter jacket and slashes.
People think it's cold.
This is cold for us. Just wait, you stay down here long enough, you'll become just like us. Yeah, well, the time will come. The youth minister we used to have was from northern Michigan, and he was down here long. They lost their layer, so to speak. Yeah. We came down here from Oklahoma, which was in the middle of a very big cold snap. We were fine that first winter. The second winter, we were like, man, it's cold. Well, this evening, I invite you to flip with me over to Revelation chapter 5. Revelation chapter 5. And as we get started, Richard, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Our Heavenly Father, we come to you at this time thanking you for allowing us to be here and get together and study your word, help us to learn from it and not let it apply to our lives. Be it ones that we will be here to
Thank you. All right, so Revelation 5, we're continuing the action straight from chapter 4. So we are continuing on. We're in Revelation 4, we were in the throne room of God. And everybody, all the elders and all the living beasts and everything bowing down to the Almighty. But isn't it interesting, though, because Jesus is not really mentioned in Revelation 4. Since the fulfillment of the law was accomplished through the sacrifice of Jesus and the way that Jesus lived his life, and the kingdom of heaven was started with the resurrection, shouldn't Jesus be smack dab in the middle of the throne scene of heaven? Might be tempted to think so. But that's not the way it was, at least in chapter 4. He will be, though, in chapter 5. Chapter 5, Jesus is going to be revealed and introduced again in a very impressive and a very big way. Now, obviously, we've already been introduced to Jesus. We were introduced to Jesus in this book in Revelation 1, with the appearance of Jesus as the one who sits on the throne room of God. But we're past the introduction, we're past the letters. Now we're moving into the letter proper. Now we're getting to the meat of what John wanted us to learn from the book of Revelation. It started last week with what's going to be the centerpiece of heaven, God's throne. And how everybody bows to the king. Be it Caesar, what they had to deal with, anybody else. Everybody bows to the king. But today is also about a very important lesson. But it starts right where we ended last week. So that means the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders are all bowing down and taking off their crowns and laying them before the throne and then singing praises to the Almighty and basking in the presence of God, when suddenly, in chapter 5, verse 1, then I saw on the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. We have a 7-sealed scroll. We don't really use seals anymore. What's the purpose of a seal? Oh, that's the one I've been talking originally. I thought someone mentioned.
Another little copy.
Do what?
Keep them closed, secure.
I know, but they're wax. What's the security?
Well, it's broken.
Yeah. Do y'all buy something if the freshness seal has been tampered with at the grocery store?
No.
Why not? It's contaminated. Yeah. We like the movie signs. Sorry. Yeah, because someone might have tampered with it. You can tell that it's been messed with. That's the purpose of the seal. Just tell it's wax. It's not going to keep anybody out. But once you break the wax, you have to be really good, because it's not just wax, it's also a picture in that wax, the seal. You'd have to reconstruct all of that, and that just wasn't something that you just did. It wasn't a simple matter of just melting more wax and putting it over the crack. It was, someone could tell that you were in it. So you have this scroll, and it's written on both sides, and it's sealed with 7 seals. Sealed with 7 seals. I think they're making more copies.
Oh, is it fine?
That's one of them. You get 2 tonight.
Oh, okay.
Now, what's inside the scroll, or what's with these seals? Well, the seals have to do with chapter 6. We're not doing that tonight, so don't worry about that. But some say the scroll refers to deeds in the contract. Possible. That's how business was done back in the day. One would conduct business and affairs of state this way. They would transcribe the scroll, with important affairs of state and then seal the scroll with a seal or even multiple seals. So it's possible. Other theory is that it could be a will and testament sealed with 7 seals for 7 witnesses. Could be. Again, that's just something to get us to think. That's what it is. It's an object that we can grasp. It's something that we can latch our mind to. The thrust of chapter 5, though, is not on the scroll. It's not about the scroll. For now, all we need to consider are the seals. But even in considering the seals, we don't have to get specific about it because a big discussion about the seal is going to take place in chapter 6 moving forward. Seals mean security, authenticity, ownership, and authority. If you were a messenger back in the day and you were presented with a scroll from a local governor and with instructions to take this scroll to the emperor, and it was sealed, do you dare open that thing? No. It's a federal crime still in this country to read somebody else's mail or to steal mail. Steal mail. That's what that would be like. It would be like stealing mail. You know, you don't get to tamper with something that is sealed with somebody else for somebody else's benefit. Consider, for example, Matthew 27. You know, it's a little detail about when they were putting Jesus in the tomb. In Matthew chapter 27 and verse 66, we are told that so they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. Okay, so they sealed the stone. How did they do that? The stone was already the size of a car. Bigger, little. Do what? Oh, I have no idea. Anybody else need a copy?
I know.
Oh, Alma does. Thank you, Glenda. I guess I should make more next week. That's cool, though. That's a good sign. Anyway, the rock was already the size of a small car. We're just going to put this, BMW, Volkswagen Beetle right in front of it, and just leave it there. So nobody was going to move this thing. But yet they sealed it, and what they sealed it with was wax. What was that going to do? Pilate sealed it with his ring. Ooh. It had nothing to do with the wax. It had to do with the authority behind the seal. If you were with us when we did, and this has been a long time ago now, but if you read the book of Esther, and also you get this in the book of Daniel, who was the most powerful, or what was the most powerful person or thing in the Persian Mede Empire? If you don't know a name, say a title.
Scribe?
Hmm?
Scribe?
No. And if you said king or thought king, that's still wrong. The most powerful thing in the Persian Mede Empire, according to the book of Esther and the back part of the book of Daniel, it was the signet ring. Remember, once that signet ring spoke, once it stamped something into law, nobody, not even the king, could change it. That's how Daniel wound up in the lion's den. This is how come the Jews were put into that situation they were in the book of Esther. Because the signet ring spoke, and in both of those instances, the kings felt remorse, but there was nothing they could do about it because the signet ring spoke. It's all about authority. The seal is about authority. So there's a scroll with seals on it. And so, check out verse 2. It says, "So I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, 'Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?'" So you have a scroll with 7 seals on it, and you're looking at this thing. This is in a book called Revelation, which comes from the root word reveal. We're supposed to be revealing something. And first thing out of the chute, after all the introduction and after all the pep talks of the 7 letters to the 7 churches of Asia, now we're given this scroll that's sealed 7 times over. Oh, we really want to know what's in there. Because that's the point of the book, to reveal. So the angel asks the obvious question. Who can open it? Who can open the scrolls? No one can open the scroll. No one. Are we disappointed? Can you imagine this letdown? Again, look at everything. This is our 7th class in Revelation. And we're just now getting into some division stuff. And we've been working through all of this. Next thing you know, we're to a dead end. We have a scroll that no one can open. No one. Nobody. No thing. Nobody. How bad is this? It goes on to say, and no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. No one can open this scroll. No angel or heavenly body can open this thing. None. Again, if we think angels are such hot snot, they couldn't even open the scroll. No one on earth could open the scroll. No person, no animal, no created being. I know angels are created too. But nothing on the earth realm can open this scroll. No one in hell with Satan and his angels can open this scroll. Nobody can open this scroll. The reaction is sorrow. And I began to weep loudly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. John's reaction is to weep. Why? No one has been found worthy. That's the problem. No one is worthy. The seals on the scroll can only be opened by the one who is worthy. There's nobody that they've found yet that is worthy at any stage of creation. Heaven, earth, hell. Nobody. Our modern sensibilities might say, well, just take it. What do you mean? Take a knife and open it. You kidding me? Just pop that sucker open. All of this, the image we're supposed to get, again, it's not about the scrolls and it's not necessarily about the seals. All that chapter 5 is going to thrust towards is the idea of being worthy. If you're a note taker, write that one in your chapter 5 somewhere. It's all about being worthy. Who is worthy? John's weeping. In verse 5 it says, and one of the elders said to me, weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of Jesse, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. Someone can open the scroll. They found someone who can open the scroll. Yes, we can continue on. But who did it say could open the scroll? Lion of Judah, the root of Jesse. Okay, we got some stuff here. Lion of Judah, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. You flip back to Genesis 49. If you have a bookmarker, be sure to leave it. Revelation. In Genesis 49 and verse 8, it says, Judah, your brother, shall praise your hand, shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down. He crouched as a lion, and a lioness who dares rouse him. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples, binding his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He has washed his garments in wine, and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth are whiter than milk. Flip over to 2 Samuel chapter 7. Second Samuel chapter 7. Verse 11. God says to David this, And we're starting about halfway through verse 11 with that and, that sentence. And I will give you rest from all your enemies. Moreover, the Lord declares to you that the Lord will make you a house. When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, and who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Now, this is one of those prophecies that has an immediate fulfillment and then a later fulfillment. The immediate fulfillment is Solomon. And David's line that was able to continue as long as David's family remained faithful. And even during times when David's family was not faithful, God said, he'll endure because of the promise I made to David. But there was also a later fulfillment. Jesus Christ, the firstborn of the living and the dead, the one who would die and then die no more. He is the ultimate fulfillment of this prophecy, born in the tribe of Judah. You read in Luke, Jesus' genealogy. You get it in Matthew and Luke. Matthew brings it back to Father Abraham. Luke brings it all the way back to God. The genealogies. But then you have the root of Jesse. What is that supposed to mean? Has anybody ever heard that expression before? Flip over to Isaiah 11. Isaiah 11. The root of Jesse is a reference to David's family. Now, you have the tribe of Judah, but the tribe of Judah is made with tons of families. Well, narrow it down to the family of David. So someone from David's line is going to go on and do some incredible things. And again, this was Jesus. Look at what Isaiah wrote in Isaiah 11. In verse 1, it says, "There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide disputes by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, the calf, and the lion and the fattened calf together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox, the nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra. Boom. And the weaned child shall put his hand in the adder's den. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." It's prophesying the Messiah. There's a reason why Jesus is called the Prince of Peace. You look at those animal illustrations towards the end. These predator and prey relationships, they're going to hang out together. And that's hearkening back to the creation of the world. When God created the world, everything was vegetarian. Everything. Death had no place here until sin came into the world. Man and animals didn't start eating meat until Noah came out of the flood, or came out of the ark after the flood. There was no death here. Isaiah is looking forward to a time where there won't be any death there either. And everything that's supposed to be killing and eating each other is going to get along. But he's going to bring peace. He's going to bring wisdom. He's going to bring righteousness. He's going to bring love. He's going to bring all that, good counsel, everything. He's going to bring all that. This is what the Lion of the tribe of Judah will do. This is what the root from the stump of Jesse will do. And Jesus fulfilled the hereditary rights to being the Messiah. He had the pedigree. The question is, does he have the authority to open the seals? The answer is yes. Go back to verse 5 and look at what it said. "And one of the elders said to me, Weep no more. Behold, the Lion, the tribe of Judah, the root of Jesse," and then there's something else, "has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. It wasn't just about tribe. It wasn't just about blood. There was also another part. He had to conquer. That's how come he's worthy. He conquered. Jesus is not the Messiah just because of who he is. But he was also the Messiah and continues to be the Messiah because of what he was supposed to do. Why is it that Satan tried so hard to get him to fall to temptation? If Jesus sinned even once, he could have not been the Messiah. Not because of his bloodline, but because that wasn't enough. He also had to live perfectly. When the Old Testament told the people, when you bring me a sacrifice, you bring me an animal without blemish, a perfect animal, the perfect sacrifice. This is what Jesus had to be his entire life. He had to be perfect. And if you fell short, he could not be the perfect sacrifice. This is why he is worthy, is because he conquered. And you go back and look at the 7 letters to the 7 churches of Asia. You don't have to look at these verses, but I'll list them for you. Revelation 2:7, verse 11, verse 17, verse 26. Revelation chapter 3, verse 5, verse 12, verse 21. You know what all these have in common? These are the verses that to he who conquers. Every single letter had a section about conquering. Jesus has never asked us to do anything that he didn't do first. Never. Love your enemies? He did it. Self-sacrifice submission? He did it. Giving all to fulfill the law and command, and will of God? He did it. Conquering and overcoming the world? He did it. He's never asked us anything that he didn't do himself. Each of the 7 churches that we've looked at, before last week, the previous 3 weeks before, were encouraged to conquer the world, to overcome, to endure, to continue on. Jesus conquered the world with his earthly mission, with being able to live perfectly. The fact that he conquered on top of being the Son of God gives him authority. So on one side, you have his bloodline, his heredity, the fulfillment of prophecy. That just by being born, he fulfilled some of that. Being born of a virgin, being born in Bethlehem, and all that. His life started fulfilled prophecy. But on the other side of that equation was his choice. You have to give Jesus choice. You have to give Jesus the option to either be on that cross or to not be on that cross, or his sacrifice is meaningless. I was so proud this last week. I was finally able to break in somebody who really had a really hard time understanding free will. You know what it was? And we kind of look at the wrong side. Well, that means Jesus, God knows every choice I'm going to make. But you know the thing about free will is, if we don't have free will, then that means every act of love that we will ever do in life has no meaning. Because we had no choice. It's not just about the bad things. God knows about the bad things we're going to do. It's about the good choices we make as well. And what makes a good choice, what makes an act of love worth it? The fact that you chose to do it. But if you take our choice away, every good thing we ever do has no meaning. What's the point of it? Jesus has to have choice, or his sacrifice on the cross means nothing. It means nothing. It's just a script. Something he had to do. Now, his choices are what made him worthy. Do what?
You see it in the garden?
Yes. The battle on the cross was won in the Garden of Gethsemane. Goes there and pray, and the great anguish, sweat and blood, and the whole deal. But when he leaves, he's ready. So let's talk about this Lamb, because it's time for the great reveal. The great reveal. It says in verse 6, and between the throne and the four living creatures and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing as though it had been slain, with seven bones, with seven horns and with seven eyes, which are the seven spirits of God sent out into all the earth. It's to reveal, with all this buildup and all this waiting, we might think that we're going to see the conquering Christ that we saw out of Revelation 1, with the legs like burnished bronze, the hair like lightning, the eyes like fire, and the sword coming out of the mouth, and the whole shebang. No, instead we get a lamb that looks like it's been butchered, with seven eyes and seven horns. It looks like a failed experiment from Future Farmers of America. This is what it looks like. But what's the point of this? The lamb that was slain. What is Jesus on the cross? And you have to remember Jesus on the cross and what he was. And again, it goes back to the choice. Do we understand that Jesus could have stopped that anytime he wanted to? Anytime. He told that to the disciples. Peter was going to defend him. Oh, well, thank goodness for Peter. He almost saved Jesus. Fisherman with a sword. Watch out now. But you remember what Jesus said? Put your sword away. Don't you know that if I wanted to, I could call down 12 legions of angels and my Father would send them? It's 12,000. That's a lot. Do we think an army on earth could stop that? The armies of heaven had struck down enemies, great armies, complete armies of Israel's enemies in the Old Testament. I think they could have handled a ragtag mob made up of Jewish guards and Roman centurions. If Jesus didn't want to be there, all he had to do was say so. He was the lamb that was slain. So forgive me this imagery, but think of a zombie lamb. Zombies are really, I mean, no disrespect to the Lord. I hope you know that. But for us to get this, zombies are very popular right now. Think of a zombie lamb. Think of a lamb that has been struck a killing blow, but is still up walking around when it has no business doing so. When Jesus came off that cross, he did not look pretty. Going up on that cross, he didn't look pretty. Book of Isaiah tells us he was beaten so severely he no longer resembled a man. Let that sink in. Take Rocky 1 and multiply that by like 1,000. I mean, it was awful what he went through. Some people gave Mel Gibson a hard time because they thought he went too far with the gore and the violence and the Passion of the Christ. He was either right on or didn't go on far enough, is the reality. Jesus did not look like a winner going up on that cross. He had 7 horns. You might remember this from the Daniel class. Anybody remember what the horns meant on an animal, or what horns mean on an animal? Any animal. It doesn't have to be prophecy. Any animal. What's the purpose of horns? Okay, protection. Why, guys, when you go, or girls, I'm sorry. I did live in Oklahoma where tons of women went hunting too, so forgive me that one. When you go hunting, why are you looking for the big rack? They're pretty. They can hang Christmas ornaments on. No, what's so impressive about the rack?
A bigger price.
Power.
Power. It's all about the power. You see a deer with a rack. What does that mean? How long has that deer been around? How many scrapes has that deer might have gotten into? How many fights? How many times has he had to defend himself and won? Horns and antlers in the Bible and prophecy. It means power. Just like in the animal kingdom, they mean power. That's what it's talking about, power. So this one has 7 horns, a complete identity of power. 7 eyes. Well, eyes we use to see. He has 7 of them, complete vision. Or, some people believe that this points to the omnipotence of God and Christ. Flip back to Zechariah chapter 4. Zechariah chapter 4, it's in the minor prophets, but it's one of the bigger ones. So it's right before Malachi. So if you get to Malachi, just turn back a page to get to Zechariah. But in Zechariah chapter 4, it's just a verse, but it's in the middle of this vision. And what he says is, these 7 are the eyes of the Lord which range throughout the whole earth. That's what the seven eyes do. They're called the spirits of God, but again, what do? They enable God to see. It's the idea of God being able to know, God being able to see. Christ, now look at what's happening here. We're not talking about God. We're talking about Christ. What is Christ in comparison to God? What is the relationship between Christ and God? Son, but on a hierarchy.
He's
Is
one.
one above the other?
They're one.
They're one. This is important. In the book of Revelation, Jesus is being given attributes that belong to God. All seeing, all knowing, all power. It applies to Christ as well. But then we come to the moment. This moment. The taking of the scroll. This is the key moment of Revelation 5. It's all about, remember, it's all about being worthy, but worthy to what? Worthy to being able to take the scroll and to open it. That's what all this is about. And the only one who is able to take the scroll and to open it is Jesus Christ. The only one ever. That's it. So this moment when he actually takes it, the action is building, and he takes it. This is a very key moment in the book of Revelation. Again, if you weren't here last week, we talked about how chapters 4 and 5 really set up the rest of the book. Because it's all about power, all about majesty, all about being worthy. This is super important. And it says in verse 7, and he went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne. In other words, he took the scroll from the right hand of God. Who's going to go up and approach the throne of God like you belong there? We still have royalty in this day and age. You just don't go up and sit on the throne. You just don't go and approach the queen. That's not the way it's done. You just don't go up and shake hands with the president. That's a good way to get tackled by some very unhappy people in suits. But you just don't do that. You have to be worthy to approach the throne. The Lamb walks up there like he owns the place. The Lamb, a lamb. We just got done in chapter 4 talking about some very groovy beasts with heads like lions and men and eagles and cows, with wings and 6 wings on each one, eyes on the front and the back, and 24 elders with crowns of gold, all this impressive stuff. But it's the slaughtered lamb who is worthy to approach the throne of God. That's the story we're supposed to be getting at. Who is worthy? The slaughtered lamb. So the lamb approaches where no one else could. This shows us the Lamb has honor, majesty, and authority. So then what happens? In verse 8 it says, and when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fall down before the Lamb. They just got done falling down before God in chapter 4. Now they're falling down before the Lamb. And each holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals, to where you're slain, for you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation, and you have made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on the earth. They fall down before the Lamb. They each have a harp, which was used in worship in the Old Testament. Each has a bowl full of incense, which also incense, very big part of Old Testament worship. But what was the incense? Incense was the prayers of the saints, which is a cornerstone of New Testament worship. Go back and read the Old Testament. Look at how important that incense was and what that incense, the purpose of it was to be a pleasing aroma before God. John, writing in Revelation, says this is what prayer is to God. It's incense. He wants to hear our prayers. They sang a new song. The Old Testament has songs from time to time, a couple of examples. Exodus 15, Deuteronomy chapter 32. They sing these songs after important events. The Exodus 15 song they sing after the Exodus out of Egypt. Deuteronomy chapter 32. This is a song that God told Moses to teach the people of Israel before Moses goes on the mountain to die. But it's again to hearken back. There was also a song out of the book of Judges, the Song of Deborah, which they sang a song to commemorate that fight that Deborah orchestrated. But that's what the songs were. They were to look at Israel's history with God, look at the way in which God saved his people and how God has sought to lead his people. Also, sometimes how the people have failed to obey God and the lessons that come from that. These songs are about God and Moses, God and Israel. But here they are singing a new song. And the new song is about the worthiness of Christ. Worthy are you to take this scroll. Okay, that's the key point. To open its seals. Why? For you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God. What people? We just got done looking at 7 churches of Asia, the letters that were sent out to them. There were some times in which the Jews, the Nicolaitans, people who followed the teachings of Balaam, people who followed the teachings of Jezebel, there were people there who were trying to pull the people away from Christ. What people did God want to save? From every tribe and language and people and nation. All of us. God wanted to save all of us. And you have made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on the earth. Brothers and sisters, we call this the church. Have you ever been tempted to downplay how important the church is in the world around us? The book of Revelation reminds us and reminds us again. The church age, the kingdom of heaven, is what Jesus came to die for, to get started. So that we can have forgiveness of sins, so we can have a hope of home for eternity in heaven, but also to kickstart the church age. That's how important God felt about it. That's how important Christ felt about it. How important do we feel about it? This is a big deal, what we've been able to have in the church age. But they continue. In verse 11 it says, Then I looked and I heard around the throne the living creatures and the elders, the voice of many angels numbering myriads and myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing. And I heard every creature in heaven and on the earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them, saying, To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. Verse 12 contains a 7-fold praise to the Lamb. 7-fold. Power, wealth, wisdom, might, honor, glory, blessing. Verse 13, we get a 4-fold. Blessing, honor, glory, and might. All of this dedicated to the Lamb. So the question is, what does this say about the Lamb? He's equal. Yeah, he's equal to God. And this is so important. Because we have people today, like our Jehovah's Witness friends, who believe that Jesus is God's only begotten Son, in quotation marks only, and what that means is that his life began in heaven. Jesus was a created being. He is described as God's firstborn creation and the exact representation of God, but is believed to be a separate entity and not part of a Trinity. Jesus is said to have been used by God in the creation of all other things, but he is not God. In fact, if you read, the Jehovah's Witnesses have organized and created their own Bible. And just for reference, you might know this, you might not know this. If you don't know this, we're about to get educated. In John chapter 1, verse 1 of a typical Bible, it says something along the lines of, In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Is that familiar? Okay, in Jehovah's Witness Bible, it will say this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. Catch the difference. They try to take the majesty of Jesus away by saying that Jesus is not God. Jesus was created. I gave you another worksheet tonight. And this worksheet contains 6 heresies from the ancient world that actually one of them started about 70 AD, the same year that Jerusalem was sacked by Rome. So again, not still in the first century, these things started coming out. And again, what they're trying to do is that we have Jesus. And what Revelation 5 is trying to tell us how worthy Jesus is. And the only way that Jesus could be the Messiah is if he fulfilled all Old Testament prophecy and made the correct choices, lived a life, and chose to die on that cross. He has to do both to be the Christ. And he has to do it based on his own free will. To take any of that away, in essence, takes Jesus off of that cross. But people try to do it. They try to do it either because they don't understand or they just can't picture anybody being that good. Just to run through these really quickly, you had the Ebionist. The Ebionists denied the divine nature of Christ. In other words, they believed that Jesus was a normal human who was empowered by God. He wasn't the Son of God. He was just empowered by God. The Spirit came upon Jesus at his baptism as a dove, and it left him when he died on the cross. But it was the Spirit of God that empowered him. In other words, Jesus is not divine. Again, if we take the divinity of Jesus away, Jesus becomes a liar. Because how many times did Jesus say in the Gospel of John alone, the Father and I are one? You had Docetism. They denied the human nature. In other words, Jesus was unable to experience any emotion or suffering. This is, I believe that this was the inspiration of what I call, and you see this in Catholic churches, what I call the Lord Jesus on the cross. You ever seen that guy? Just kind of bland look, he's dying of boredom is what he's doing. I mean, that's the thing. That Jesus lived a life, and he was God, and he wasn't human at all. He didn't feel our pain. He didn't feel what it was to suffer. He didn't know what temptation was like because he couldn't be tempted because he's not human. Jesus lived a sinless life because he had no choice. Okay? What's wrong with that theory? Did Jesus experience suffering? How do you know? How do you know?
He cried.
Huh?
He cried.
Oh, shortest verse of the Bible is what? Jesus wept. Why would Jesus weep if he can't experience emotion? Okay, there's one. Did Jesus suffer? How do we know? The Bible tells us in the Gospels and some of the miracle accounts, his heart would go out to people. His heart would go out. That's emotion. Jesus was the most loving soul to ever walk God's green earth. Oh, yes, he had emotion. But could he also experience pain? Could he experience suffering? Yes. He felt every blow of his suffering. And he also felt the hurt of betrayal. Yeah, he felt it. So that doesn't wash. And again, you take his choice away, he can't be the Lamb. Can't. Then you had Arianism. Arianism, they're another group that denied the divine nature of God, similar to Jehovah's Witnesses. In fact, they had a tagline that's kind of famous in church history circles. This was their tagline: there was once a time when Christ was not. There was once a time when Christ was not. In other words, in the beginning, God created Jesus, and then the heavens and then the earth, and then we got rocking and rolling. Jesus was created. He might have been the first created being that God ever made, but then after that he continued on, but Jesus was still created. But again, that makes Christ a liar. It doesn't work out that way. You had Nestorianism. Say that 3 times fast. They denied the union of the natures. Jesus had, in other words, Jesus had 2 personalities. He had a divine nature and a human nature. And the 2 shall not mix. That doesn't work, because then it's like Jesus would just turn off his human nature whenever it fit, and then Jesus could just turn on his godly nature whenever it fit. It just doesn't wash. You had Eutychianism, denying the distinct natures of Christ. There were 2 separate entities, the human and the divine. And then at a certain point, they all got jumbled in there together. So there were 2 natures before the union, and then only 1 nature after the union. At some point, he only became God. But again, that doesn't work. Jesus had to be human throughout his entire life in order for his sacrifice to mean something. That's why that doesn't work. Then you had Apollinarianism, which is overplayed. It's overplaying his humanity, and then the spirit takes over the natural self. Again, when Jesus hit 30, he was hardwired, low-jacked by the Spirit of God, and then everything he did after that, he had no say in whatsoever. Saying in very simplistic terms. But again, take the choice away, what are we left with? Nothing. It's dangerous playing with the choice of Jesus, saying, and again, you still give him that, Jesus could never have sinned. He had no option. He had to be perfect. He couldn't sin. You're right, he had to be perfect. But yes, he could have sinned. Or else it means nothing. And how would it sound? Jesus is not put in the path of temptation at all, and yet he expects all of us to live sinlessly? How's that fair? The Hebrew writer tells us, no. We have a great high priest who sympathizes and knows what it's like, who faced every temptation that there was to face. Yeah, he knows. He knows exactly what it was like. The Bible has the habit of showing us who is and who isn't worthy of worship. In Acts chapter 10, verse 25, and I know we're in South Texas, which is a very heavy Catholic area, and when you're able to establish that trust, to be able to work with somebody, this is a great verse to take them to. This is Peter going to Cornelius' house. Now, Peter, in the Catholic faith, Peter's the first pope, right? Check this out. He goes to Cornelius' house. Cornelius is a Gentile. He's a centurion. And he received a vision from God to invite Peter over to the house so that Peter can tell him the gospel. All right, so Peter gets there. And the first thing that Cornelius does is to drop to his knees. It says in chapter 10, verse 25, when Peter entered, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him, Peter. But Peter lifted him up, saying, "Stand up, I am a man too. Don't worship me. I'm a man too." He then proceeded to tell him the gospel. Jump forward to Acts chapter 14. Acts chapter 14, verse 11. It's a good one, since some people today still think Peter was the first pope, and Peter had the robes and the rings and the whole. It's like, you know what? He had the opportunity to let people worship him and people bow down to him and show him all that kind of honor. And he said, no. We have to remember. In chapter 14, verse 11, this is Paul and Barnabas, and this is when they're in Lystra. It says, and when the crowd saw that what Paul had done, doing the work there, healing a crippled man, they lifted up their voices, saying in Lycaonian, the gods have come down to us in the likeness of men. Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul Hermes, because he was the chief speaker, Hermes being the messenger of the great gods. And the priest of Zeus, whose temple was at the entrance of the city, brought oxen and garland to the gates and wanted to offer sacrifice with the crowds. The idea is in honor of Paul and Barnabas. But when the apostles, Barnabas and Paul, heard of it, they tore their garments and rushed out into the crowd, crying out, "Men, why are you doing these things? We also are men of like nature with you, and we bring you good news that you should turn from these vain things to a living God, who made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them." So again, here we have another example of men trying to worship other men, and Paul says, no, don't do it. You want to have some fun reading? Look up in Isaiah and Jeremiah, the times in which God speaks about idols. In the book of Jeremiah, he says, why are you bowing down and worshiping these idols? These idols are nothing more than scarecrows out in the field. You're bowing down and worship. Okay, so we're not supposed to worship idols. But what about angels? In Revelation, twice in the book of Revelation, Revelation 19 and Revelation 22. In Revelation 19, verses 9 and 10, here we are at the end of the book of Revelation. After everything that John had seen, if you want to know what John saw, keep coming to the class. He gets overwhelmed and he forgets himself. That's the only thing I can think of. And he tries to bow down and worship the angel who's showing him around. But look at what the angel says. In verse 9 of chapter 19, it says, "And the angel said to me, write this, blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are the true words of God. Then I fell down at his feet to worship him. And he said to me, you must not do that. I am a fellow servant with you and your brothers who hold to the testimony of Jesus. Worship God." Then again, in chapter 22, the last page of your Bible probably. In verse 8, it says, "I, John, am the one who heard and saw these things. And when I heard and saw them, I fell down to worship at the feet of the angel who showed them to me. But he said to me," after he's done been told once, "You must not do that. I am a fellow servant with you and your brothers, the prophets, and with those who keep the words of this book. Worship God." Have you ever met anybody who got a little bit too caught up in the angels? I remember we had some in New Mexico. You know, they were so turned around by the angels. It was all about the angels, and it was angel worship. We just like them. Walking a thin line. But what does the Bible teach us? Man, we're not supposed to bow down and worship. Idols, statues, we're not supposed to bow down and worship. Angels, heavenly beings, we're still not supposed to bow down and worship. We only worship God. So when we get to Revelation chapter 5, when it has all this honor to the Lamb, what does that say about the Lamb? The Lamb is God. The Lamb is worthy of worship. Worship him. And that killed me. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Total joke. Total joke. Jesus is worthy of worship because he is part of the Godhead and because he fulfilled the will of the Father, being the perfect sacrifice. Revelation 5. If you get nothing else out of tonight, Revelation 5 is a celebration over the redemptive work of Jesus. He is worthy. He can open the scroll. Question or comment? This will be on the final. Okay. Anybody have a question or comment? Clear as mud? That's why I enjoy the book. Because if you haven't noticed it yet, hopefully we've been able to show you some, but Revelation is a powerful book. So many facets. Church, God, Christ, a hierarchy of things. To endure, why we should endure, what we have to look forward to. It's all in here.
Let me ask you, when the judgment day does come and everything, does he hand back to God everything?
Sometimes I get asked, what happens to us when we die? And as for me, I don't worry about it. Do you ever take a long road trip when you were a kid and either your parents or your grandparents had to drive you like across Texas, or, for example, or just on a really long road trip where you fell asleep in the back seat and you woke up and you were somewhere else? When you were that child, did you worry? Were you scared to fall asleep? No, you were just lulled away. Why? Because somewhere, you might not have had the vocabulary to voice this stuff, but somewhere in the back of your head, they're driving. We'll end up where we're supposed to. That's my view of what happens when we die. We get some clues. We can talk about some things, but in the end, we can just fall asleep, and let the person who's driving the car get us to where we need to go. Might be simple, but I like simple. Harper apparently doesn't.
Brother, is that you're supposed to scare? Sometimes you have to change and, you know, but, Sunday, I went to, see our brother, Ramiro Munoz, he's an ICU.
Yeah. Well, he's in a room
Never okay. Sunday was he was in ICU, and I was talking to him, he said, I'm ready. I'm completely ready to go with you. And I was like, wow. Like a Christian, we're supposed to be like that,
now.
right?
Yeah, we are.
He said, I think I'm ready.
Live as Christ and to die as gain. Someone else once said, has the world been so kind to us that we're not willing to let go of it and follow Christ when our day comes? Are we going to be so sad to leave this world? Will we be given tons of things to look forward to?
I think we experience pain, and we know that if we go out there, there's no pain, so I think it's when you're ready, you know what I mean? Because he was feeling a lot of pain, and he's coming.
Yeah.
And you know what? Over there, you're not in pain, you're not in nothing, so I'm gonna go.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you can tell by looking, I never run a marathon. What are you laughing at? I've done my fair share of walking though. And I like to walk. I like walking great distances. But the thing about walking is I have a hard time just getting out to walk just to walk. I want to have a destination in mind. That's how we survive this world. That's how we conquer it. That's how we overcome it. Do we have the destination in mind? Do we know where we're trying to go? And do we want to get there? See, that was the problem with the Laodiceans. They knew of Christ. They had a church there. They knew the teachings of Christ. But the world was so kind to them, the very well-off city at the time, that they didn't really have much longing to get to where the teachings of Christ told them they should be excited to get to. So they were lukewarm. Lukewarm, no purpose, no drive, no benefit to the lost who were around them, because they lost sight of that finish line. If we want to be successful Christians, we have to keep sight of that finish line. Have an idea of where we're going. Be excited about the final destination. Someone once said, why would we be excited about heaven, being in heaven one day for eternity, if we're not excited about the possibility of heaven now? We're trying to get to heaven, but the truth is that we can have heaven on earth now. If that's what we're striving for.
Worship the name of God.
Yes, now. All that love and belonging and everything that we're told that we can look forward to in heaven, we can have that now. Now.
You said that one last week, and I honestly, I'm repeating myself every day. From Sunday, you say last week, second, can you say right now? If you're not happy to go to heaven, we don't have the emotion to go to heaven, what's the point?
Yeah.
So, I've been telling my clients too, what are you expecting about today? And it's just blind, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know.
The world has put us in a mindset of not to expect anything. You notice this? Everything's the same. Everything's bland. Nothing's deep. Nothing, all the music's the same. The movies are the same. The TV shows are all the same. The restaurants are all the same. The music stations are all the same. The magazines are the same. Everything's the same. Do you see this? Do we notice this? It's like the Matrix all over. It's everything is the same. And we're so happy, aren't we? But we're controlled. Everything's the same and more easily controlled. Do we have the courage and the faith to break free from the system that the world is trying to force us into? This goes beyond politics and political issues, by the way. This is about spiritual warfare. The devil against God. That's what this is. That's what I'm talking about. He's trying to lull us to sleep with the various temptations. The problem with America, there's different problems all over the world. One of the big problems in America is that we're the land of the comfortable church. It doesn't have to go through extreme persecutions. We're being lulled to sleep. We're like Sardis. We're like Laodicea. Sardis, who's told, wake up! You're falling asleep and you're about to lose everything. We're like, no, that was Sardis. We're like Laodicea. You know, we think we're wealthy. We think we have all this stuff. And in reality, we're pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. Even though we have all this stuff. We got to break free from that in order to conquer the world where we are. That's in the Rio Grande Valley. Do we have the courage and the fortitude to live counterculturally from what the Rio Grande Valley tells us this is how you should live? We start doing that, the Word of God's going to start working. But it has to be done on purpose. It has to be done based on our choice, just like Jesus on that cross. It has to become the priority. Can you imagine going 33 years and not sinning once? I mean, that includes his teenage years. Goodness. But why was he able to do it? Because that was the priority of his life. What's the priority of our lives? Anybody else have a question? See, now this is getting fun because this is how it is Wednesday morning. We finish when we finish. We don't care. Check that clock out of here. We don't need it. Somebody's like, well, we got kids. Yeah. They'll get over it. They'll sleep in the car. Anybody else? Question or comment? All right. Well, I'm glad y'all came. I hope you're enjoying the study. I hope some things are being brought to light, maybe for the first time. You know, I hope that we've been able to be a help. Tell you what I'm going to do, because more people came in after we got started, but pass that around. If your name's not checked off already, if you wouldn't mind checking it off for us. A couple announcements. Next Tuesday, speaking of opportunity, next Tuesday the 23rd is the National Night Out, at which we'll have a table, and I finally was able to get a sign-up sheet up that's broken down in 30-minute increments. If you think you'd like to come out and help out, just sign up for whatever time you want to be here. You know, the thing doesn't start until 5:30. I'm going to be here at 4:30 because you got to set up the table, you got to get stuff out. You know, you got to do all that setup stuff, which is pain. So I'm going to be here at 4:30, and so from 4:30 till 5:30, so I'm going to be set up stuff and all that. You know, again, I haven't looked at the sun, but they typically advertise this thing to go until 10 o'clock. I honestly don't think it's ever gone till 10. I could be wrong, but I don't have any remembrance of it going to 10. 9:30 is typically how late it usually goes. But I got it all the way up to 10. About 9:30, 9 o'clock, 9:30 is going to be shutting down stuff, taking our stuff back to the building. You know, we don't have to move tables. It's going to be like chairs if people are sitting in chairs, taking extra water bag, taking stuff, the sign we have and all that little stuff. But, many hands make light work. So I'll have a sign-up sheet. I'm going to put it on the table tonight, and then I'll move it onto the bulletin board for Sunday. So if you want to go ahead and look at it, sign up, and you know what? We're not going to say we can only have so many people per time slot. No, heck no. You want to come out and hang out with us sometime during the time? Awesome. Come hang out. It's what? Great food. It's great food. It's carnival food and barbecue and funnel cake and all this stuff that will inspire you and think, man, I got to go to the gym tomorrow. So, so come out for that. So, as far as announcement, our prayer requests go, Violet Daniels, prayers for Thanksgiving. Thank you to each of you for all the prayers and thoughts. Also, thanks God for continued blessings. Josie Moreno, prayers for strength. She just lost her sister not that long ago, and she's also having a hard time. We need to pray. I don't know if it's on. I don't think it's on here, but pray for those in our church family who suffer with things like arthritis and joint pain and stuff like this, because all this cold and wet, it's not their best friend. There's a reason why people go south and go to dry places. So we need to pray for them. Ramiro Munoz, prayers for healing. It says he's in ICU. He's actually in a room now. He's in room 555. And I need to get him. He's in room 555, and when I saw him, he had fluid on the lung that they were able to get out, and they were testing it. And basically, they were waiting for the doctor to come and read the report. Ram and Dora Munoz.
Oh,
Yeah.
the hospital?
McAllen Medical. So he told me, I told him, I was like, look, your number in the app is wrong. Okay. Little FYI, if you get a chance and you have the Chirp app, check your phone numbers to make sure it's right, because I tried to call them and I tried to call his sister Nellie. That was the wrong phone number too. And I kind of got chewed out by the person on the phone. Well, why did you want her? Why don't you call her number? I thought I did. You know, that's why I just don't say, hey, I'm looking forward to it. But anyway. But he's in room 555, and again, they were just waiting for a doctor to read a report. He was actually in very good spirits and doing all right. Daughter and family of prayers for joy and happiness is from David and Diana Williams, Jose Cruz, and Juanita Lopez and family prayers of understanding for spiritual growth and health. Blanca Zambrano, prayers for healing, for good health, and also from the work to go on family. We pray for Jenny Williams, prayers for wisdom and making a major decision. Family of Greg Adams, this is Joelyn Huddleston's cousin who suddenly passed away at 41 or 42, something like that. So leaving behind, I think it was 4 children and a wife. Be with people who are suffering from hurricane stuff situations. Roxanne, Ari, I'm not even going to try. Continued prayers of calm recollection. She is having important tests for RN course at STC. And Macy's postponed her eye surgery until after her trip. So, when's your trip again?
The 25th.
25th of November. Tomorrow. Okay. October.
I have some other good news too.
What is that?
Well, my doctor wanted me to go to a glaucoma specialist because he thought I had glaucoma. And so when I went to the specialist, I did not.
All right.
Anybody else? How's your brother doing?
Oh, I don't know if I get to pick up on 1 week, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
okay.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. I'm not going to stir that hornet's nest. It's okay. Anything else that we need to mention? Always forget to look. Anything going on this weekend? We have a guest speaker Sunday, so you don't have to listen to me flap my gums. We're having Chase Palmer from the Sunny Glen Children's Home coming in and speaking to us during the assembly time. So that'll be going on. So please come out. That's in case you don't know, that's local children's home down in San Benito, Texas, that we help support. So we hope that you come to that. But besides that, I ask that you join me in prayer, and I thank you all for coming out. Stay warm outside. Nobody catch cold. All right.
Body coat?
Yes, Manny, you can. I just want to see you wear it. You have to wear the hat too. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful day that you blessed us with, and we thank you for everything that you have done for us, and we thank you for your Son, who is the worthy Lamb of sacrifice, and we're able to depend on him. We pray that his life of sacrifice might inspire us to greater faith and to greater deeds, and to work and keep working, and that we may strive and be excited for what we're trying to get to. We ask that you guide us and be with those who ask for our prayers. In Jesus' name,
Jeff.
Yes.
Do you working?
Okay, let me turn off the camera real quick.